Hello Battle Brothers and Sisters, John Wick here. Welcome to the Beginner's Guide on Space Marine 2. Here I will explain on things I would do when starting off the game. If you are completely new to the series, I would recommend doing the campaign because it will help you teach the very basics of the game and show you the movement and attack combos that each weapon can offer. You can finish the campaign between roughly 8 to 12 hours, depending on the difficulty you chose. Personally, I really loved the campaign and enjoyed the story a lot. It was a really good time watching all the cinematics and seeing how the story unfolded, especially as a player who played the first Space Marine. Now, if you decide to do the campaign, you can test out combos on each weapon by going to the menu. This will be important because the combos will have a different effects, such as the Chainsword, doing a Grand Slam, which can disorientate and knock back smaller enemies. So looking up and studying the combos will help you ensure you're in survivability. The only weapon that I've noticed that is not in the campaign is the Power Fist. The Power Fist is only available in the PvE operation modes and PvE modes. Now, when you have finished the campaign, you can move on to PvP mode, an internal war, or co-op PvE missions, which are called operations. Now, these operation missions are kind of interesting because they also took place in the campaign. One thing to note is that all PvE and PvP modes are separate progression from each other, meaning whatever weapons and classes you progress through, you will have to do it each time in PvP and on PvE. As of now, in Space Marine 2, there's a total of 6 classes you could choose from. You have the Tactical Marine, who's a jack of all trades and can do a little bit of everything. His special ability allows to target an area and a radius, making the highlighted targets take more damage. You have an Assault class who flies up in the midair and strikes his enemies from above by slamming into them and causing impact damage around the area. You have the Vanguard, who closes the gap between his targets to get up close and personal and do increased damage. You have the Bulwark, who is a tank and can set up a banner to help him and his teammates hold their ground and get out of tricky situations. You have the Sniper, who shoots and prioritizes high value targets and can be an asset in saving teammates and getting out of sticky situations. And lastly, you have the Heavy. He's the best damage dealer overall, and he can dish out a heavy amount of damage, but requires spacing and timing to do so. His ability allows him to create a hemisphere that blocks projectiles in a frontal 180 degrees of where he is facing. For now, I'll be delving into the PvE operation mode. With these 6 classes, they offer a lot of different styles, and each of them have their own weaknesses and strengths. For example, the Heavy class lacks in melee because he does not have a melee weapon. It is up to the team to cover each other's weaknesses and use their strengths to their own. With this in mind, all classes' abilities have their own set of hidden perk given to them when playing. For example, the Heavy here, the starting perk, when Iron Halo is active, all squad members within 50 meters take 10% less damage from range attacks. For the Sniper, he has increased headshot damage by 10%. For the Bulwark, his health increases by 20%. For the Vanguard, contested health regenerates 50% faster. For the Assault, perfect dodge time increases by 50%. For the Tactical, any unequipped range weapon reloads automatically after 10 seconds. Now, surprisingly enough, this also applies to whenever he has no reserve ammo left, meaning he has infinite ammo as long as you work around with that 10 seconds. Now, if you don't know what class to choose from or want to get a hard start off in the game, I would recommend doing trials first because they will give you in-game currency and a small dose of what each class can bring. By doing this, you can get a good idea of what class you like best, and at the same time, you can get a good head start with completing these trials. These currency I will explain further in. After you pick your class, currency will be really important as it will help you upgrade and get stronger to do the higher difficulties. The currency in the game are different, and for example, these orange looking coins are called requisition. Requisition is used for buying weapons and cosmetics in the game. Now, the things that are next to the requisition are called armory data, and armory data is only obtainable through the mission, which I'll go over later in the video. Now, it's one thing to note that is important is that there is a hard cap or limit to what you could have on your currency. So for requisition, the orange looking coins, there's a cap of 990, and then for the armory data, there's 20 of each. So you could have 20 greens, 20 purple, and 20 yellow. Now, one thing to note is that if you're going to hit the cap, it's probably wise to use it and spend it on weapons or cosmetics before you hit that cap. That's why I'm mentioning it. Now, another thing that's important too when you're going to invest into weapons is that there are some weapons that are exclusive to the class For example, there is this power sword that is exclusive only to the bulwark. And then the chainsword, however, is usable by 4 classes. So for example, the bulwark can use the chainsword, the vanguard, the assault, and the tactical. So it might be wise to invest into a chainsword and basically spend your points and invest into it, so that way in the future, if you decide to switch any classes, you could have an advantage. Next is on how to upgrade and get stronger in the game. You'll be needing to use the in-game currency in order to progress through the different tiers of weapons. As you can see there are 4 different tiers of weapons, which are Standard, Mastercrafted, Artificer, and Relic. In order to progress through this experience bar, you'll just have to simply play missions, and then eventually you'll get to the next tier. For this example, I have Mastercrafted ready to go for us. Something to keep in mind is that you could use higher level data to unlock previous tiers, which is a great system that the devs implemented, making it so higher level players don't have to go back to the lower level difficulty. Now, once you open the tier by using an armory data, you'll have to unlock weapons by using requisition. And after that, weapon will be available for you to use. Now each weapon will have their own XP bar, so you have to either play with that weapon or use an armory data in order to master that weapon. In doing so, you will obtain a mastery point, and a mastery point is something that you can spend in the Perk tree. Now keep in mind, you will have to do this for each and every weapon in every tier. Now one thing to keep in mind is that there's a limited amount of mastery points you can obtain for each weapon. For the plasma incinerator here, I have a total of 11 points. And how do I know that? Is because if you go to the page over here on versions, you'll see that there's a total of 11 weapons that I can obtain and master. So 1 for standard, 2 for mastercrafted, and artificial and relic have 4 each. That's totaling up to 11 weapons. 11 weapons, 11 mastery points. Now the mastery points are used for the perk tree, and there's a top or bottom perk tree. The perk trees are pretty straightforward and simple. If you count down all the way to the last point here, you'll get up to 11 perks, meaning that you'll have to use all your mastery points to get to the end of the perk tree. There is different pathways though you could take. So for example, Mastercrafted here, you could go down to a different tree, or Artificer has a different branch, and Relic has also a different branch. So each weapon can have their own different little branching and their own playstyle depending on your flavor. One thing you may notice is that many weapons can do more damage against certain enemy types. So for an example, I have the chainsword, and if you progress through the perk tree of the chainsword, you'll eventually get to a perk that will say melee damage against extremist level enemies increases by 15%. You may ask yourself, what are extremist level enemies? So right now in the game, there are 4 categories that each enemy type is classified into. There is Minoris, Majoris, Extremis, and Terminus. These 4 categories are separate, and depending on the weapon or perk that you choose, you could do more damage against them. Now, if you want to know what category each enemy is in, you could simply look at the enemy in game and see on the top middle. It'll classify what that enemy is. Another thing here is I'll put a list on the video in the screen so you can see what kind of enemies belong to which category. Next is on to the weapon stats of the game. For ranged weapons, it's pretty self-explanatory and simple, so I won't have to go over it. But for melee, there's one particular stat that is very important, and that will determine how you're going to be playing in close quarters. That is called defense. So if in the top left here, there's 3 types of defense stats. There's fencing, which increases your perfect parry window, block, that offers no perfect parry window, and balance, which is moderate perfect parry window. And balance is probably in between fence and block. Now, the reason why this is very important is because once you get to your relic weapons, there's some things that you have to sacrifice in order to do more damage or have strength in. So, for example, I have here for balance, this does more damage, but you have to sacrifice speed. For block, this probably has the most damage output and DPS overall, but you have to sacrifice your parry window for it. And then fencing does the least damage, but you have increased timer on your perfect parry. Now, I will show you guys clips of each one, so you guys can determine on what you want to go for. The only two ways you could obtain armory data in the game is by killing mini bosses that are randomly generated in the map. And the other way is to find these floating servo skulls that are also randomly placed in each mission. This will incentivize the player to and teams to look out for a servo skull in every mission that you do. Now, it is also possible to get 2 armory data in one mission as long as you have a boss that spawns and you find that floating servo skull. Another side objective that the game offers are gene seeds. Gene seeds are important because they can offer more XP for the entire group. To get the extra XP, the person who is carrying it must not get incapacitated, and they must successfully complete the mission. If the person who is holding the gene seed does go down, the gene seed will be lost and you cannot obtain the bonus XP. So whoever is going to carry the gene seed must be the person who is the most confident to not go down in the mission. One thing to always look out for are the disablers in the game. Now the units that are disablers are lictors, raveners, and even chaos terminators. They will do a lot of damage to you if you're not looking out for them. As you can see in the video, my armor gets destroyed. If I wasn't a bulwark, I would have taken a huge amount of damage. Now something to keep in mind is that if you see a teammate that gets disabled by one of these units, you can save them from taking harm by doing enough damage to them that they'll get off your teammate. Usually a charge attack will be able to do the job. Another tactic you can use when fighting against Tyranids is focusing on the bigger units. When killing a bigger unit, it will release a synaptic discharge affecting the smaller units. With this discharge, it can stun and sometimes even outright kill smaller units. One of the most important things in the game is the HP mechanics. Now when you take damage, you'll have a white decaying bar. The decaying bar represents how much health you can recover by dealing damage to enemies. Executions is one of the sure ways of recovering HP. But as you can see here in the video, I took some bits and damage, but I was able to recover some of my HP by dealing damage to the other units. A consumable you can find in the game is called a Guardian Relic. These relics are able to save you from dying completely and they can clear your mortal wound. A smart thing to do is that if you go down, you could save your Guardian Relic and have someone pick you up, and then when you go down again, it will use the Guardian Relic. In doing this, it will consume the Guardian Relic and clear your wound, essentially giving you 3 lives for the price of 1. Unfortunately, I did not have a good video on this, but this is a great tactic to utilize if you have a Guardian Relic, and I felt the need to at least mention this. You can also clear a wound by overhealing with the Medicae stim, as shown here in the clip. If you get overhealing with the Medicae stim, you'll be able to clear your mortal wound. So basically, just making sure that you have 2 lives again. One mechanic in the game is if you're taking too much toxic damage from shooters or standing on venom barbed wire, it will build up a toxic meter. To know how much toxicity you have built up, there's a meter with an eye in the middle of your screen. Once it has been built up, your vision will drastically decrease. Now the only way to get rid of this is by fighting through it. Those are all the tips and tricks I have from playing, and hopefully this helps out some beginners out there who would like to know how to get started in Space Marine 2. Now if you want additional help, have questions, or just want to hang out, I do stream on Twitch on a regular basis. You can also join my Discord and check when I go live. Links will be in the description below. Thank you all for watching, and remember, the Emperor protects.